Sold at 560.
785 the first, 785 the second, be sure, 785 the third, final time, sold. The third and final time at £910,000, sold. Welcome to the latest edition of the Allsop Prop Chat. My name's George Walker, and as always, I'm joined with my fellow auctioneer, Richard Adamson. Today we've got a special guest, Allsop's head of risk, Jim Bridges. Jim, welcome to the party.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So Jim heads a team, and really I think it would be very useful for people to hear your background. How did you get to Allsop's? Because you started in the army and you did all sorts of other things, which is quite interesting. So talk us through your journey, Jim.
Yeah, so a very non-traditional route, I think. It's a compliance, risk, anti-financial crime. I joined the army as a very young man. I spent 20-something years dashing around the world in operational roles and left the military and went to the charity sector. I worked at the RNLI for a while, running the RNLI College, before I went into banking. Joined a large international bank, and I spent the best part of 8 years there, finishing up as the head of financial crime in a Middle Eastern country, running their financial crime team.
Head of financial crime prevention, we assume.
Yes, absolutely. Anti-financial crime. But it was really interesting because it gave me that, broad insight into sanctions risk, into money laundering, fraud, into the relationships between geopolitical spheres, particularly in that region, particularly at that time. And it just really linked back to what I was doing in the military, which is about bringing the right people together to have really positive outcomes. And I think that bringing that experience into a different sector, it is amazing. I like doing the difficult jobs. I like bringing people together, and I really enjoy that challenge. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm at Allsop.
Okay, I mean, it's a slightly moving feast, isn't it? I mean, Rich and I will remember at the end of 19, we first started registering buyers, which is 5 years ago, and we all thought at that point, oh my goodness, it might actually threaten our business. But it seems to be, if you do it properly, to be a real bonus, actually knowing who you're selling for and who you're selling to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's two parts. The first part is that there's a set of rules that everyone has to follow, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in property, accountancy, the legal sector, whatever. We have to know who we're dealing with. And if we know who we're dealing with straight off the bat, then it enables us to really transact more swiftly and with more surety. And that benefits both our vendors, because we're able to demonstrate we know our bidders and buyers, particularly in the auction sector, but equally...
You quite well, didn't you?
Yeah.
We'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah. But also it gives our buyers a bit more surety that once they've registered to bid and once they're successful, actually we're kind of hitting the ground running. We're not then going back out and asking additional questions. And some of these questions can be seen as intrusive, and some of these questions are unwelcome. But, if we get this done up front, it makes a much smoother transactional process for everybody.
So for some of the listeners, I suppose they'll have a sliding scale of familiarity of what we're talking about and what you do. So can you, in a nutshell, describe, because it's effective for all transactions, all parts of our business.
Yeah.
Probably the easiest way to describe it is what we do from an auction perspective for buyers and for sellers. Or probably buyers are probably easier because it's the same principle, isn't it, for the sellers ultimately?
Absolutely. So taking the sellers first, I think understanding, is that seller the rightful owner of a property or an asset that they're trying to dispose of? Establishing that fact and making sure that we understand who ultimately benefits from that sale. So who is going to receive the funds from the sale? It's as simple as that. And for our buyers, it's really understanding, who is this buyer? Is there anything around this buyer that might prevent them from completing the transaction? And in some cases, there's a little bit more delving into sort of the source of funds and stuff, depending upon kind of the risk that we're looking at.
Because there's a structure point there, isn't there, in terms of, you've summarised that really well, obviously, in terms of the high level of it all. But in a lot of the occasions where we're going through that process for buyers and for sellers, there are companies and structures involved, rather than it just being Mr. Jones purchasing and Mrs. Smith buying it, or whoever it might be, and you go through that process, which we still do anyway for those individuals. But there are companies, there are funds, all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So can you sort of elaborate on how that suddenly starts to get quite technical?
Yeah, because the vast majority is relatively straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah,
I guess so.
So the vast majority for particularly our residential market is relatively straightforward. Individual buyers, small property companies, small conglomerates of people coming together to effect a purchase. For some of the more complicated and developed entities or companies. They may have complex corporate structures that sit above them. And so being able to understand where and who has ownership of those structures is the most important part. Ultimately, it's about having that, I suppose, transparency around the structure, understanding who benefits from the sale or acquisition. And some of this comes back into the types of clients that we then act for. Understanding and having really good, strong processes means that we can work across the market, from individuals looking to transact, invest, buy their first home, whatever it might be, all the way up to our big institutional investors and funds acting for REITs and large regulated firms and investment houses as well.
And some overseas entities. I mean, by spreading that wide, it doesn't actually preclude many people, does it?
No,
It
absolutely.
just slows the process down in some cases, but most people, vast majority of business is rubber stamped at some point, in my experience.
Yeah, no, and I think we're really fortunate that we've got a slick and robust set of procedures that enable us to quite swiftly work through the process and really avoid snagging up either getting a property to market or enabling someone to bid or buy in that auction world. And likewise, in the non-auction transactional chains, I think it's that speed to enable the transactions to occur, because the last thing you want is unnecessary delay, because that can sometimes mean that transaction doesn't happen for a number of reasons.
And to give people an idea, I mean, you've got a team of how many? 4 people?
Yeah, so there's 4 of us, and then we have some of the business that rotate through. So we're upskilling our graduates.
It's interesting, isn't it? 2024, our graduates who rotate around 3 slots in the business in a 2-year period are also now including a spot with you, because it's so central.
Yeah, and it makes for a much better client and customer experience. If the business-facing teams and those that are managing those client relationships understand what we need, when we need it, at which point in time, that makes for a much smoother transactional experience.
And interesting, we've had some folks in the auction team been through your gym, and it does make it, as you say, when you get to the 11 o'clock the day of the auction and someone hasn't quite or doesn't know what they want or they need, it's very helpful.
It's made a big impact on our team, and I think that it's fair to labour the point as much as possibly can, is that actually for us as a business means that we're upskilling now, but over the next 5-10 years, if bearing in mind our retention of graduates is something like 70%, they'll become partners and stay in the business. Yeah. You play that through on that journey in 10 years, you're going to have some people who've got a much better skill set than we do now, because they've gone through that process the whole way through. And I think it's great, and we see it firsthand now with our graduates and apprentices who know the law inside out and what's required, because they've been through your team. So it makes us better at what we do and quicker.
So bear in mind, Richard, you sell 2,000 or 3,000 assets a year. We sell about 600. Jim, how many checks do you do in a year? And you and your team? So
last year we did about 12,000.
12,000.
12,000. So there's clearly there's a commercial impact here. The cost of and the resourcing to do that and complete that, to create this environment that enables those transactions to happen, as well as having graduates rotating through the team. Outside of what would traditionally be seen as core kind of graduate activities. We've made a decision as a business that this is an important investment and it gives us a commercial advantage.
Yeah, and I would say for any graduates listening, clearly you'll have the city office and you'll have valuations, you have auctions and transactions to deal with as well in your rotation. You won't be spending 9 or 10 months with Jim's team. Although biscuits are much
That's
better.
an important point, though, is that obviously there's several moving parts to this. There's obligations. We have an obligation to do this. What we're telling you and talking about right now is nothing particularly new of recent times. But actually, what is important is the ability we talked about earlier of going above and beyond of what we're required to do.
Yeah.
To would you tell me why do we go above and beyond? At the moment, and how does that affect our clients and reputation?
What we're trying to do is we're trying to apply a standard, which means, firstly, that we're market leading. We don't want to come under criticism for failing to do something in the right way or to the correct standard. I think there's a really important part there, because the reputational risk of getting that wrong and can be huge. Not just the reputational risk, but the potential financial penalties for doing so. That's the really important part. The second part is that if you start to just embed a culture and everyone knows what is required, it becomes much more simple. This isn't new across the market. You'd expect similar conversations to be happening with your solicitors that are acting, with any accountants that you have helping with transactions. And so I think it's just building that awareness and understanding, which does everyone good. It also helps to prevent some of those societal harms that come through financial crime.
Because that's why we're doing it. Yeah. One of the main reasons we're doing it.
Yeah. what we're trying to do is prevent the proceeds of crime from entering the property sector. They can be large assets, and you can move high value relatively quickly if you don't complete these sort of basic checks and understand who your clients are.
And the really important part from a business point of view, from the auction side of the business, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong if I phrase or frame this wrong, is that ultimately it's about interpreting or where a business relationship commences.
Yeah.
And in the auction world, that initially was quite hard to determine, but it was determined that that's at the fall of the hammer.
Yeah.
If you want the fall of the hammer to be a legally binding contract in law, which we protect with our lives because it is our USP. Therefore, what's different from the auction business to the wider transactional market is that we need to go through that process on every single bidder.
Yeah, so we're ready to go when that relationship starts to fall of a hammer, because then we don't need more checks. Therefore, it's unconditional. I think that's so important, that, isn't it?
It is, because otherwise the other option, which is more cost effective for a business, is to have conditional contracts. So the hammer falls. And a byproduct is then the next step is that you go through the AML checks, and a buyer backs out of the AML checks. The contract's not there to be enforced. Yeah. So we've made a commercial decision which is costly up front to ensure the protection of the contracts our clients need and want and desire for unconditional contracts and immediate transactions.
And Richard, do you think many of your clients pick up on that?
Initially, it's interesting because you get a lot of our buyers like yours, buyers and sellers are both, and there are other operators out there as well. Some of those that are less well informed from a buying perspective would say, well, you make it a bit harder for us to register to bid compared to others. But when you explain to them why, and they say, well, actually, as a seller, I'd quite like that obstacle is quite quick. I've seen more recently whereby sellers have used other auctioneers and sales have fallen through and they can't enforce, and they've come back to users because to be quite honest, they didn't understand the differences between what you were doing because it's not that transparent.
It's one of those things, like terms and conditions, it's quite buried, isn't it?
Yeah.
Until you had a bad experience and you ask the question, and suddenly, because traders are used to going through our market quite quickly and transacting quite quickly.
And particularly for lots of different sellers, but receivers, when they are under time pressures and best price and they need to cash flow, the bank wants to know when the money's coming back and all the rest of it. To do all the hard work, get there, and then have to go through that process, which can either take too long, which drags the process out, or doesn't end up happening. It doesn't do us any favours. That's our USP is we will transact in these timeframes around about these sorts of numbers, and that will be the end of that. You take that away, it becomes quite a difficult sell.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. I mean, any way it's affected your market. I mean, you take it on lots in big portfolios. I suppose that gives those institutions comfort that there's 80 lots there to be sold in 3 weeks' time. You can do it. I
think without question, there are a lot I won't name them, but there are funds and REITs and people that we sold for where they are, if I say regulated, and have further obligations, which we have been able to assist with, i.e. going above and beyond our own corporate responsibilities to help them where others probably wouldn't do that. And I think it's, to coin the phrase that's used about AML checks and whatnot, we want to be seen as a safe haven for buyers and sellers to transact safely. Yeah. And that's what I think we are.
I agree, and sometimes the processes can be a bit clunky. Yep. And we're working and have worked really hard to make sure that we've simplified this as far as we can so that the client experience is really, really slick. We've invested in online systems for completing checks. We can still deal with hard copy and paper copy documents. So, we can deal with all types of clients, all types of vendors, in all types of scenarios. It's that time pressure that usually hits us, particularly with our bidders and buyers, as we're just about to go into those auction cycles.
It takes 6 days, isn't it? Six days before the auction starts.
And I think from our point of view, George is right. You started off, George, when you introduced everything, is that 4 or 5 years ago when this all started, we thought this is an absolute disaster for our business in terms of the time it's going to take to register people. That was before COVID and before going on online and streaming. Once we've got our head around it and you've set up systems and processes and policies in place that we know what we're doing, and more importantly, our sellers and buyers know what they're doing, so it's not ambiguous. The upside to that is we have incredibly rich data. And I think that's where, if you asked the question earlier, George, am I seeing that from vendors? Yes, I've answered that in part. But the other part is they say, actually, I can tell them the day before an auction that we've got the bid of security from 3 or 4 buyers. These are the entities and the people that are buying it. There might be a special purchase.
And by bid of security, you mean money?
Money, yeah. So once they pass that process to bid, they put £10,000 card hold in our system, which means they can bid. To have that conversation with a vendor who's saying, what's the interest? 5 years ago, we would say 15 downloads, 4 viewers, had quite a few good phone calls. You might have 5, you might have 10, you might have 1, you might have none. That was just the nature of how auctions work pretty much. I'm simplifying it, but that was it. Now the conversation is the night before, I've got 3 registered bidders with their funds. They're only registered on these lots. One of them lives here next door, and you're building that picture before we get there, which makes us much better at our job, albeit that information comes in late. That's one of the real positives. We can forecast, we can prepare ourselves and our clients for what's going to play out. Push that further down the road, and you look at we've then got this data of people. George has got someone who wants, I've got 50 buyers who want a Ladbrokes. Only one of them bought it. Okay, so when I get a call saying I've got 6 Ladbrokes, I've got 50 people to call. Makes you better as an agent.
Yeah, and you've already onboarded them.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have to go back through a really laborious process to, you might have to ask some additional questions if the business transaction is slightly different. But essentially, you've done all of the hard work.
They're ready to go.
You've got them on the books, and you're able to enable that transaction.
George, before we run out of time, what's new? What's going on in your market? You released a catalogue a week or so ago. We've now got a general election coming up, which we weren't expecting a couple of weeks ago. How's the market changing? How's it reacting? What's new?
Yeah, I think everyone would agree that the commercial market's had a sort of pillow over its head for 18 months. And I love to think that the announcing election date is going to change. It's not really. It's all about interest rates. And whilst, our head of research was adamant that it would be May the 9th when things would change, along with everybody else, it hasn't happened. So we're now pretty in a stasis again. Keir Starmer's crowd will get in, and they're a pro-growth agenda. I don't think it changes. I think people just want to see those rates fall. Perhaps actually, do you know what? We're in a relatively high interest rate environment. It will be that for some time. So let's just suck it up, get used to it. Certainly the yields being paid, but they're very different. A lot of high street shops now 10% as opposed to 7%.
So what in terms of the catalogue, have you noticed the most recent release, anything different, higher value?
Yeah, Richard, I bang on about the same thing sometimes, but we had a very big run of big lots last year, and you mentioned registrations. We had our biggest lot in the February auction. I think we got £50,000 bid of security off 11 people, for a £5.5 million lot, because the client was a fund. They needed that, had £50,000 off 11 people to bid on a lot, which is tremendous. That run of bigger lots has continued, and this time actually we've got quite a lot of bigger kit in the Mayfair, Pall Mall, Farringdon, really big stuff. There's World's got a £10.5 million lot for receivers on Pall Mall. You don't expect that stuff in an auction, but I think it's a combination of, obviously we've had a good run, but my partner Nick was saying that average transaction time in the West End is 8 months for a deal. We're doing this it's been on the market 3 weeks, so between 6 weeks from launch to sale for a £10.5 million lot. And I think it comes back to the understanding of the data. And it's not all about that, of course. The market's tricky, but those sort of big lots popping up, £20 million in rare, very, very central London is great to see. And I think that continues. Up to March this year, we did 25% of the shopping centres under £10 million in the last 12 months. Again, because the speed of certainty of sale. And because the market's quite difficult. So we've got into a good place. Auctions are smaller, volumes are down a little bit, but the ability to deliver is still there.
I think we've got similar themes with us. We released a catalogue on Friday, which is an auction for the 19th and 20th of June. It's just short of 350 lots, which is a big 2-day sale for us.
Just short? You sound like, you're worried about it, which is quite a lot.
It's just, I know. Give me 24 hours and it'll be...
We have 85 lots.
Yeah, give it 24 hours, we'll have over 350. We've got a few coming in later. Yeah, my point being, it's a big catalogue, 2-day sale. It looks to me, anecdotally, there's more, 16 lots over £1 million, which is more than it has been for a while. It's sort of hovering single figures, 10 for a while. Better quality stuff in there. We've got some really nice bits of really nice PD building down at Maidenhead, which, obviously legislation, as we did a podcast recently, has changed.
Yep.
There's more appetite for that. So that's an interesting market to monitor and see how that
Maidenhead
goes.
was one of the first regenerative town centres.
And it's a nice spot, nice looking building, not in a retail park. It's a good spot. We've got a really nice student block in Stoke being sold by a proper student operator that doesn't fit in with their portfolio. Sort of high-end student stuff, which is about £2.5–3 million. There's some really nice, interesting bits that maybe people have not been wanting to sell for a while, thinking actually now let's get on with it. And I think, without stating the obvious that everybody else is stating, is that the upside and the positive of the election is that we were all planning for it to be later in the year, and therefore we'd have a grinding, slow halt towards that with nothing much going on. Yeah. At least we're going to get it out of the way with probably the same outcome. Yeah. So it speeds up that uncertainty, and hopefully things can get back on track. So in terms of our catalogue, I'd like to say it's more interesting than normal, but it's the weird and wonderful it always is.
350 is a big
deal. And there's a lot of regional stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff that's 15 to 20 grand, but there's also £3.5–4 million lots in there. So it's something there for everybody, really.
Yeah, it is. And I think that the political change is just going to be very welcome, because it's a clean sheet as needed really in number 10 and go from there. And whatever Mr Farage wants to say and do, it's going to be a majority. Interesting. I think that the Trump situation is going to have more impact because if Trump comes in, it could be inflationary, and then all the idea of falling rates may just fall away. Anyway,
I was almost tempted to say the election will be over soon. It can't get any worse.
Yeah.
The last time I said that was just after the pandemic, and interest rates went up, and we went into an economic downturn. So I won't say that. So we can edit that.
Look,
out.
we sell real estate.
Please.
That's what we do, Richard. We're not economists, and everyone has their own view.
Before we go, Jim, where is the journey of AML going to go? What's going to change in the short term? How do you see it playing out? We're all used to it now. And we've, as today's podcast is saying, how well we do it and better than most and above and beyond.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop where it is it? It's going to be progressive. It's going to increase. There's going to be more obligations. Where do you see it in the next few years?
So I think if we look just geopolitically, what's going on globally, there's a lot of uncertainty. We've got 56 global general elections this year.
It's up 3.1 billion people voting or something ridiculous.
Yeah. So nearly half the global population are voting on their democratic elections. We've then got various touch points around the globe that are, incredibly difficult to understand the direction that they're going. And we have a lot of financial flows coming out of lots of these markets and other places that we just kind of need to keep an eye on and understand what's coming in. Capital flight has always been a big issue. We're likely to see more of that as this political uncertainty continues. So I expect that we'll be doing definitely the same. I don't think that the checks are going to become more intrusive. I think just how we're doing them will become a little bit more scientific and a little bit smarter and better because we understand the data, we understand our clients, we have better access to sanctions lists and politically exposed lists and adverse media and these sorts of things. So the stuff that's going on in the background will just help us to smooth the process and hopefully make that, far simpler for everyone.
So, interestingly, for every 12,000 buying entities you clear, surely the goodness you're making a hole in it. But it seems to me that every year there's another 12,000, which is a joy of what we do. There's just more people want to have a go. Be interesting to see what it is 12 months' time.
Yeah. Even more interesting is we don't know, kind of who we're keeping out of the market. So the risk that we're preventing from getting in the first place, a bit of an open question there.
Yeah, but there's good bits. There's several countries that come off the list, isn't there? So I cite Dubai.
Off the high risk.
Dubai is one example, which is actually very positive because a lot of our investors will live out there and certainly trade assets out there. So that's really good. Look, it's excellent, Jim. Thank you for clearing some of the mist on that. Registration, we talk about it quite a lot. It's become a real asset to what we do, and your team are really helping that. So for any feedback, questions on the clearance, jim.bridges@allsop.co.uk. That's how you get hold of Jim. Richard and I are on our email as always, richard.adamson@allsop.co.uk or george.walker. We look forward to your comments and, of course, the next pod. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, George.